Hi, welcome to Teen Pride Book Talk. My name is Lucy, and this is the program on AADL TV, where each episode I take a few minutes to talk about a young adult book that is both inclusive of and representative of folks in the LGBTQIA+ community. And the book that I would like to tell you about today is called At the End of Everything. And this is by Marieke Nijkamp. This book was published in 2022, and it was written during the COVID shutdown. And it is a story where a group of teens who have already been cast aside by families, by society, have to find a way to work together in order to survive. These teens are at a juvenile center in Arkansas called Hope Juvenile Treatment Center. It's a little bit ironic that it is called Hope because it does not provide any hope for any of these teens. This is a group of teens who has experienced being pushed aside to the margins for race, for sexuality, for gender, just merely because they are being labeled as criminals. And at the beginning of the book, all of the guards at Hope leave without explanation and don't return. And the teens there wonder why. And so they realize, first of all, they're not being guarded. And this immediately brings to mind freedom, and a group of them decide to leave the treatment center together, where they haven't left since they've been there, and to see what's going on and why the guards have left, and also maybe to escape. So as soon as they get outside the treatment center, they are met by a group of police, and they are informed that there is a terrible plague that is affecting the whole world, and these teens are not allowed to pass on the road. And when they try, the consequences are really pretty bad. So they return and go back to Hope Juvenile Treatment Center, and they realize they're on their own. They've been abandoned once again. They were already in a place where they were cast aside, and now there's nobody looking out for them, nobody informing them of what's going on in the world. So they realize that the whole world is experiencing this plague, and they are not really sure what to do. We don't even really know many of the characters at this point, but by name. There's a group of them that decides to take the risk and leave again. They think it can't be worse out there. If the whole world is experiencing this plague, we should be able to find a road that's not guarded, and we'll see what's out there. And then some of them choose to stay because it's known, and they have food for the time being, they have shelter, and that's about it. And they have each other, but they don't really know each other very well. And we don't know them well yet, but we start to get introduced to them. This book is a multiple point of view book. There are 3 characters who narrate the chapters. And the first one we are introduced to, who is narrating the first chapter, is named Logan. Logan is a twin. Her twin sister is Leah, and Logan is nonverbal. She relies heavily on Leah to help her navigate the world. She and Leah have their own special twin language. So it is a sign language, but it's not a sign language that anybody else can learn or use. And this keeps her very much in reliance on Leah. And right away at the beginning of the book, Leah gets sick, and you realize that this plague is not going to stay outside of the treatment center. So that's another thing that these teens have to contend with. And then we start to get to know them a little bit better as they divide into these roles. One of the other 3 who narrates the chapters is Grace. And we do meet Grace in Logan's chapter. We see that Grace is getting pulled out of the food line by guards and handcuffed for talking back. Really what Grace is doing is defending someone else. And as we get to know Grace better, we see that this is something that Grace does despite the cost to herself. What Grace is doing is she's correcting the guards when they misgender another one of the teens at the treatment center. Emerson is non-binary, and the guards misgender them, and Grace speaks up against it and gets punished for it. And we learn that she is in this treatment center for aggravated assault, but we don't get any more details than that. And this is much like the other characters who are here. We get the details of why they are in the center over time. It's not really revealed to us right away. And they don't always know the specifics of why the other ones are there either. So it's sort of like we are on this parallel path with them to discovery of why they are there and who they are. There are some people at the treatment center who we never know why they're there. Emerson is the third voice that we hear from. Emerson is non-binary, and that is why they are at this juvenile treatment center. When they came out to their parents, they were sent there. And at the center, they are referred to as a status offender. And that's what we know of Emerson's story and why they're there. We also know that Emerson loves to play the violin. Though there are just these three narrators, they interact with and start to tell us about the other teens there. We get to meet this group of teens who sort of takes charge of the ones that stay. And they're going to have to strategize, and they're going to have to deal with illness and death, and they're going to have to find food and learn how to survive. And they start to take on these roles. Grace, who naturally is someone who comes to the defense of people, seems to really care about what happens to other people, and she sort of becomes the leader without anyone really voicing it. People look to her for the answers about what they should do. Emerson ends up becoming a gardener. They take on the responsibility of refurbishing the gardens that are at this treatment center in the hopes of growing food. And then Emerson also becomes the person who buries the dead. It's very important to them that the people who are around them who are dying are treated with respect. They start to bury the dead and then write them a letter and then play something on the violin for them. And in a way is creating this memorial that becomes a ritual for any death that occurs there, and starts to create near the garden an unmarked graveyard. Logan, who is nonverbal, doesn't have the guidance of her sister and can't really communicate very well with anyone except through writing, but she realizes that she can help in the kitchen. She can take inventory of everything that they have. And this is a really important role, and it becomes very important to her to be accountable in this way and to really be contributing. And then there's a character, Casey, who is a very close friend of Grace's. He and Grace are very connected. We don't know why Casey is at Hope. We're not even sure that Grace knows why Casey is at Hope. But Casey jumps in this role of doctor because nobody wants to get near anyone who's getting sick. And Casey can't stand to see that. And so he jumps in and he ends up running the infirmary. All of these roles are sort of self-assigned in that people step into them just through action. Nobody asks them to do it, but once they start doing it, or once they're compelled to begin because of something they saw or interacted in, that is the role that they're expected to play. And this disparate, abandoned group starts to become a community, and a community that is running itself. But they do have finite resources, and so they are going to have to figure out a way to continue to survive, how they are going to replenish their resources. What's really difficult for this group of teens is that they have been doubly abandoned. There is this idea of this double abandonment in this book. There's the incarceration. They're living at this juvenile treatment center where they were left or cast aside, not really with any expectation of change or getting out. And we start to learn that a lot of the ways that they acted were because of forces beyond themselves. And oftentimes they were doing the right thing in a situation, but in the bigger picture, it would have been a wrong thing or a troublesome thing. There are many reasons why they're there, but for the most part, they have been put there and forgotten about. And now they have this new isolation of, first of all, creating this insular world at their treatment center. As much as they are protected from the outside world, they're also sort of kept in to themselves, and they're forgotten. The pandemic is also sort of a metaphor or a story device that works well to explore what it means to be left alone, to die. And these are people who are already relegated to the margins of society, and now they are continuing to be cast in these shadows, and they really have to find each other, and they do. And so though this story is about a plague and it is about this double abandonment, it is also a story of connection and friendship and love. There are definitely many different types of loving relationships in this book, whether they are platonic or queer or familial. There are people within this group who do care about each other. That the first narrator of this book, the first voice that we hear from, is someone who is nonverbal, introduces us right away to the idea of language and how we use it, and really what is lost in translation, what's lost when this what's lost when this group struggles to connect with the outside world, struggles to find a way to connect with each other, and what they lose through miscommunication. And also, on a very basic level, we have the example of Logan, who is speaking her own language, and what might get missed or lost or overseen when people can't understand each other. Language is also important here when thinking about how it is applied to people. All of the teens at Hope have been labeled, whether it's because of sexuality, the supposed crime that they committed, whether it's because of race or gender. They've all faced the power and detriment that language has. I really liked that the story was told through these 3 points of view. They seemed very distinct, even though you knew whose chapter it was. I think that I would have been able to tell had I just jumped in the middle of that one whose voice it was. And those 3 different points of view really added depth and cast a bigger picture of all of the characters in the book, because we had 3 different sets of eyes looking at them and telling us what they saw and what they heard and what they did. And this book is really about humanity, and it features a diverse group of humans. It is edgy, it's relevant, certainly, and what these teens are dealing with is very high stakes. But I recommend that you read it to see how they connect with each other and how they get through the situation that they are in. So that is The End of Everything by Marieke Nijkamp. Thanks for joining me.